Alright, what is going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. MCOC's Women of Power event for 2025 has just begun, and I wanted to talk about the subsequent champion rework vote that is taking place at the time of recording this. The TLDR is that there are 7 champions to choose from: Squirrel Girl, Proxima Midnight, Morning Star, Wolverine X23, Jubilee, Invisible Woman, and Rogue. Whichever champion wins this vote will be given a rework, and ballots are available through the in-game mail announcement, Webstore codes, and recurring daily solo objectives. There are reasonable arguments for each champ to be reworked, but after going through each option one by one, I've come to the conclusion that one champ stands far above the rest, and there isn't anyone else worth considering, in my opinion. Now, before we get into the prospect of each champion's rework, let's talk about a few overarching principles. Given that Kabam has stated this will be a rework and not a buff, we can assume that the champion's kit will be changed in some way, rather than a simple damage increase. We have no way of knowing whether this will be a large or a small change, but it certainly will be something. So this begs the question, will the rework stay true to the original champion? This is my primary concern when it comes to these potential reworks. I think each of these champions is already unique and interesting in their own way, and I don't want potential reworks to take away from the champions we already have. Another thing we can assume is that whoever gets reworked will be released as a 7-star at some point. Invisible Woman, of course, is already a 7-star, but regardless, I think there will be a way for players to get whoever wins at a 7-star level. And this is the basis for my other concerns with the rework. Assuming Kabam does stay true to the original champion, will that champion be unique in their class as a 7-star, and will they be relevant in their class as a 7-star? In other words, will this champion hold weight within their class, or will they effectively be a filler champ that most won't touch? These are the criteria I used when deciding who to vote for. Now, it is possible for Kabam to screw up any of these reworks, but because that can't be predicted, I went into this assuming what is realistically the most likely out of each rework, and then I compared them on that basis. So without further ado, let's get into the champions. The first one I wanted to talk about is Rogue. Rogue is one of the most popular Marvel characters from the list, and thus will likely get a lot of traction in the vote. I think it's very likely that Rogue will win, and I think that would be a huge mistake. Rogue is basically a non-starter for me because I don't think Kabam will stay true to the original champ. The most interesting part of Rogue's kit, in my opinion, is her unique power control, where in the right situation, she can keep the opponent below a bar of power permanently while she wails on them in the corner with her critical hits on her special 2. It's a very fun playstyle, and it's why so many people liked her when she was released and why she was so powerful and prevalent at that time. Quite frankly, I have no confidence whatsoever that Kabam will keep this or anything remotely similar in her kit through the rework. Long gone are the days of champions with genuinely good power control. The last champ like this was infamous Iron Man, who was released back in 2022, almost 2.5 years ago. Kabam has even very recently said that they will not release Magic as a 6-star, let alone a 7-star. So, while Rogue's power control is not quite as good as Magic's is, it's still good enough that I don't ever see them keeping it in her kit as a 7-star, because they just have this bias against having champs with very, very strong power lockout at a 7-star level. I think the most likely outcome if Rogue wins is a strong damage buff, stronger buff steal or buff control with her special 1, maybe some completely new unique abilities, but all at the expense of her power control. Realistically, the best we could hope for is that they keep the power steal on her special 2, but they cap it at either 0.5 or 1 bars of power stolen. And that's if they even keep the power control at all. It's possible that they remove it entirely. Effectively, what they'd be doing with a Rogue rework would likely be scrapping what makes Rogue Rogue and then designing her kit without her key element of power control. In other words, Rogue winning would mean deleting Rogue as we know her and replacing her with a new Rogue that is nothing like the old Rogue. And I really, really don't want that to happen. So Rogue is off the list. Next up is Wolverine X-23, another mutant that was very good and popular back in the day when she was released. X-23 was basically a higher damage version of Wolverine. Unlike Rogue, I think Kabam would stay true to the original X-23 through the rework. They would likely nerf her healing to be percent missing health rather than percent max health, since that's usually how they do it these days. But they could do that without ruining it. She could still have strong healing without having to be topped up all the time. The problem with X-23 rather is that I don't think a reworked X-23 would be standout in the mutant class. After the change to healing, her healing likely wouldn't be that strong, and other than, potentially some random utility that they add, like a fear debuff or something, she would basically just be a big bleed and big crit champ with cruelties and precisions and these kind of things. But both of these we already have within the mutant class. After the addition of Deadpool and Dazzler, the mutant class is sitting very high, so I don't think X-23 would make any waves within the 7-star mutant class. They need to make X-23 like near as good as Deadpool, and I don't really see them doing that. So yeah, X-23 also a no-go for me. Number 3 is Jubilee. Jubilee is another decent mutant that could benefit from a buff. She's got some interesting mechanics with her different modes and specials and prowess. And Kabam 100% could stay true to this champ as well and make her a great champ. But the problem with Jubilee is also similar to X-23, but kind of even more so than X-23, is just that there are too many mutant champs that would do what a buff Jubilee would do, which is big prowess and big specials. I think we could realistically see a rework Jubilee in a similar boat to champs like Colossus or Storm, Pyramid X, or maybe even OG Storm, where it's like the champ is good enough to be ranked up, but not good enough to stand out and be noteworthy within the mutant class. So since she wouldn't be noteworthy, I don't think Jubilee is an option either. Fourth is perhaps the most likely to become a filler champ, which is Invisible Woman. And most of that is from the simple fact that she is in the science class, and the science class is so obscenely broken. The power ceiling for the science class is so high that they would have to make Invisible Woman an absolute behemoth in order for her to be legitimately relevant within the science class. I do think she's unique enough to stand out in the science class, and Kabam would maintain that uniqueness with her fragilities and everything, but I don't think they would make her as good as Silk, Hulk, Titania, Count Nefaria, Spider-Ham, the list goes on. And so, without being that good, she would just not get that much play from the larger player base. And another thing to note is that even if they did make her that good, say they made her as good as Silk, I don't want that. I don't think we need more science champs that are that insanely broken. So for those reasons, Invisible Woman also not an option. Heading into the home stretch of champs, let's look at what a potential Morningstar buff would look like. I think Kabam could definitely maintain her design as a unique ramp-up champ that collects souls from opponents to gain power, with some unique abilities like her direct burst damage on hit and her nullify. The reason I think she's not the pick is twofold. The first is that if they do stay true to champ, then most players just won't use her, period. The harsh reality is that most MCOC players don't like ramp-up champs. So that fact alone would leave her unused by most of the community. And the second, which is not as important but still a consideration, is that we already have Purgatory as a 7-star. And although they aren't identical, they are similar enough that I think it would be difficult to stay true to Morningstar while also keeping her uniquely different from Purgatory. So, for those reasons, I don't think Morningstar is the option either. The penultimate champ is Proxima Midnight, a champ that I liked a lot upon release. I remember seeing a bunch of Realm of Legends gameplay at the time of her doing insane big special damage. She's a very unique champ that essentially forces herself to do Grandmaster Says, but then once she's done with them, she gets rewarded with very big specials. I think the potential for this rework is pretty good, but it would fail overall for the community for the previous mentioned reason that most players don't want ramp up champs. So even if she was very good and unique and amazing, the majority of the player base just still wouldn't consider playing her. On top of this, the Cosmic class already has some pretty insane nukes, so even if they gave her a Battleground specific ability that makes her start pre-ramped, she still wouldn't get a ton of play unless they make her like insanely good, which is doubtful. So that reason Proxima also does not meet the criteria. And that leaves us with the one champ that deserves the vote more than everyone else, Squirrel Girl. Similar to Proxima, Jubilee, and Invisible Woman, Squirrel Girl is a very unique champ that never really got the attention she deserved. She has a very unique ability, reminiscent of Dr. Voodoo's brother Daniel ability, in which she can send her squirrel to the opponent or keep Tippy on herself. Each provide different benefits, some of which, namely injury and distraction, are very good and unique effects that she can take advantage of. As we all know, the skill class is lacking when it comes to 7-stars, so of course adding a new strong skill wouldn't hurt. But that's only one aspect of what separates Squirrel Girl from the rest, which is that she'd succeed in all of the things that I want a rework to do. Kabam would stay true to Squirrel Girl since she doesn't have anything that they deem too powerful and would subsequently scrap, like Rogue's power control. She'd be good enough within her class to stand out when put up against the other 7-star skills, unlike X23, Jubilee, and Invisible Woman in their respective classes. And lastly, she would not require ramp up to function well, unlike Proxima or Morningstar. Being in the skill class definitely plays a role here. Like, if Invisible Woman was a skill champ, then we could have some debate there. But talking about the situation as it is, given the current situation of 7-stars, there is no room for debate here. Squirrel Girl is by far the most deserving of this rework, and hopefully you all see why. Alright, so this was definitely a different kind of video for me to make. I'm not sure how well it will be received, but hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to my thoughts on the subject. If you did, make sure to hit that like button or let me know in the comments. I would very much appreciate that. And that's all for today. So, as always, spread love, not hate. Peace, everybody.